and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are free. Single TV is available on Google, Chromecast, Amazon, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2006 forward. Now on CFL Talk, joining me are the one, the only, David Morassutti and Michael Townsend. Hopefully Michael made it in. Hello, David and Michael. Thank you for being here.
I am very glad to be here, Frank. Thank you once again on another snowy day in Toronto.
So I just came off a press conference with the CFL, and I got to tell you, it was nice to meet another young player, Pierre-Olivier Lestage.
Okay.
He's he's a top Canadian pick. Unfortunately, Montreal isn't up the ladder, so there's a good chance he may not slide down that far. He clearly made it obvious that he would like to play in Montreal. We'll talk about players like him who have the opportunity to play at home a little later. Let's start by taking care of unfinished business. As you remember, we didn't get a chance to finish talking about the three teams that were left, and they were, of course, the three teams being Edmonton, Saskatchewan, and Winnipeg. I think we left those three out.
The middle out.
Right. We left the middle out.
We came like this. We came in.
We did the East-West at first. No.
We did the East.
Did the East, and then we did some of the West.
We did the very West.
Yes, we did. Well, I go left from right, and I don't know why I didn't start with BC to begin with, because that's usually what I do. I go from left to right. Now, if you're Jewish or Chinese, you can go from right to left, but you're used to that. You can do that. The habit is going left to right, and I don't want to appear to be, because we're in the East Coast, to appear playing favorites of the East. So I always try to be nice to the West and show them respect instead of appearing to throw shade on them. So you want to start? It's a great thing that BC has done. They have a pretty good team going right now. Mm-hmm. Every team has the possibility of winning, obviously. Tell me what you think.
We're talking about BC, or we're going to talk about Edmonton, because we talked about BC last time.
Oh, sorry, Edmonton. You're right.
Yeah.
See, I'm at the page.
I mean, Edmonton, their outlook changed a little bit for me, because, they thought Scott Milanovich was going to be their coach. Then Scott Milanovich decided to join his good friend Marcus Brady in the NFL. So they didn't have a head coach. So now they sort of had to go through it all over again. It's probably one of the weirdest situations, and I kind of feel bad for the team, because there was a lot of excitement to get Scott Milanovich there, and they had to pull a Yuli and get Jamie Elizondo. Is that how you say his name? Sorry if I butchered that. But they had to do a 180 and kind of go back, and actually, fortunately, they were able to get somebody that's familiar with Trevor Harris again, because I think that's something that they've really tried to cater to. They've tried to cater a lot to Trevor Harris, with the latest hires and the latest things that they've been trying to do. Look at the two big weapons they got in the offseason. They bring back Darrell Walker. We thought this was going to be, his chance to come back to the CFL last year and, show why he is the number one. Now he's going to go and do it out in Edmonton. They added a lot of offensive weapons. If you really look at all the roster now, Greg Ellingson's still there. There was another one that they added that I'm forgetting right now. I'm just looking at my roster here, because it's all my roster's kind of got jumbled a little bit. Oh, Frank, we can't hear you.
James Wilder came in.
Yeah, sorry. James Wilder Jr. at running back. He's a guy that's done both passing, rushing, but he can do both. Armonte Edwards, that's going to be a very I mean, if we saw him a lot here, Frank in Toronto, we know what he can do. As a guy that doesn't have to be a number one, he's a pretty good 2-3 guy. They gave Jimmy Ralph, Alberta boy, a chance after didn't really work out in Toronto. Kenny Shaw, Rodney Smith, like they went with a lot of guys from the East and brought them over to the West. It's very surprising.
Well, I mean, even the previous head coach, who lasted only during the canceled season, Milanovic, was from the East, so he wanted some familiar faces. And then, of course, Elizondo comes from both Toronto and Ottawa.
Yes,
Toronto and Ottawa. So, he went along with Harris and their team in Edmonton. That is the biggest problem they have, is that head coach, because there's always going to be the memory of the media and everybody around that they were spurned by Milanovic for greener pastures. Mm-hmm. And we CFL fans sometimes get a little sensitive about negative stuff. We almost take it worse than we should. And then if we don't, there's other people that remind us. So it's too bad. But hopefully Edmonton will rise above that. And hopefully the biggest issue coming out of Edmonton is going to be the name. Hopefully that's the biggest issue that comes out of Edmonton.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed with how their season ended in 2019. They had that pretty convincing win against Montreal. You thought, okay, this gives them a pretty decent chance against Hamilton, and it just did not click for them at all. And they bring in and they added a little bit of a veteran punch, to their team. They brought in Sean Lemon, even though they let he's a guy that seems to bounce around quite a bit, but has always been productive. And he's gonna bring the right attitude to that locker room as well. I think that's another thing they just need. They need the right attitude in that locker room to really get over sort of those, tough. Last year they were kind of falling a little bit with Trevor Harris being injured. We were worried if they were going to make the playoffs at all. And I think it kind of hurt themselves a little bit that they had to do the crossover. They're a team that I'm a little bit on the bubble with. I think they should be able to contend with the top teams in the West, but new coach, it's good that him and Trevor Harris have that history, but can they get on the same page? Can they contend with some of these powerhouse teams in the West? I'm not sure.
No doubt about it. Let's move on to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. This is a team that, following the 2019 season, they finished first. They look to be having a new offensive coordinator in Jason Moss. You can't look bad at that. And then of course the breakout year that Cody Gujardo had last season played. It's always so hard.
Oh, I know. Every time.
And their defense, became very improved, as well as the bling that they wore whenever they made a great play, whether offense or defense. This is a team that it basically comes down to Cody Gujardo, what he does. Does he play like an all-star? And can the defense carry this team? Because the offense, ever since under the new management team, it seems like they've tried to be more conservative offensively and aggressive defensively. They're going to need a little more contribution from the offense, and they've got the free agents like Micah Johnson, Evan Johnson, the two Johnsons, the Herdmans, Godfrey Oneka, Larry Dean. They're bringing back John Ryan too, the hometown kicker. So this team, they're building. They lost a lot of players too, especially on defense. Key players. They came to Toronto, two of them in particular.
Yeah, they lose Charleston Hughes, who, I mean, you thought that was a big loss, and then Cameron Judge follows him. That's two key guys kind of worked, and we heard Cameron Judge talk about that. They kind of work a bit together, pass rush and the linebacker trying to work the work together. And that's not insignificant. Luckily for them, they were able to bring in Larry Dean. I think Larry Dean's will hopefully offset the loss of Judge a little bit. Although Judge was the most outstanding nominee for the West, you can't, that's not easily replaceable. And then Micah Johnson, that's a good guy to add to counteract the loss of Hughes. But they're a team, as you said, Frank, that their defense is going to be good. We know the Riders' defense is going to be good. I want to see what they can do offensively. I think like Cody Fajardo was good. He didn't make a lot of mistakes, but the problem is he wasn't forcing himself to make the bigger plays as often, and it limited them offensively. Well, guess what? The new offensive coordinator is not gonna play safe.
Isn't the main issue with Jason Moss.
Yeah. They were able to, Shaq Evans is going to be back. That's big for them. I think continuity on the offensive side of the ball is going to be important for that team. I always forget that James Franklin is the backup. That's not a bad backup to have. I don't think there's any chance of Fajardo losing his job at all. Not even suggesting that, put that aside. But, I think actually Franklin can help, a little bit with Fajardo to try to understand Jason Moss's system a bit more. It's somebody who came from that system. And I want to see the Riders take that next step a little bit. They're good. They're a good organization. They seem to be doing things the right way. It's just, as you said, can they take the step offensively? I just don't know if they have the offensive weapons to do it. It's going to be tough, but I'll let you add to that.
Franklin, his success was in it. His reputation, the positive reputation, was made in it. Jason Moss was the head coach. I think there's a symbiosis there that can't be ignored. There's a relationship that I think brought Franklin there, and Jason Moss is an interesting person. He's a guy who runs on hot. He's very emotional, which is he's diametrically the opposite of Jason Franklin. Franklin. Jason's a little more aggressive. Franklin's a little less aggressive. He's a lot more calmer. And I think Cody Fajardo is as well. So you can see by what you're saying, and I agree with you, the offense is going to be a little more intense. It has to be for Jason Moss.
Yeah, I think that they realize. I think the Riders realized the defense can only do so much. Their offense definitely needs to do more. So, Jason Moss is not afraid to put his stamp on really push the envelope. And we've seen it for years. So I think you need that. I know some people are probably a little worried about, he hadn't really put it together in Edmonton, but that's as a head coach. Offensive coordinator is just way different. He's going to have an impact in a different way. And Fajardo's, he's had that full year of experience as a starter under his belt. Usually you see a progression up. And I think with the new coordinator, we should expect him to continue to go up. He's only 28 years old. That's young in CFL eyes. He's not in the later part of his year. So he can develop a little bit more. I don't know how much more we'll see him develop. But the tools are there. The athletic ability is there. It just, can Jason Moss unlock it? That's going to be the big question.
Absolutely. Totally understood. Let's move on to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, defending Grey Cup champs.
That's for last.
They didn't have to win last year to be, so they've been champs for 2 years now, in a strange kind of way.
Longest honeymoon ever.
This is a team that knows that they won. This is a team that knows that they have the team that can win again. And their signings and hanging on to their players, directly reflects that. That's, to me, that's the bottom line. When we talk about Winnipeg, it's about stability, continuity, and in the hopes of repetition.
Yeah, they didn't lose anyone. Like you're just like, oh, this is gonna be tough. Like that's a tough loss for them. The big one that we all thought was potential to lose was Willie Jefferson back when he was a free agent, and he ultimately decided, I won here. Do I risk trying another situation where I might not be as successful when I know what I have in Winnipeg? And I give credit to Winnipeg to keeping everyone together as much as possible. At the same time, teams know what they're dealing with now with Winnipeg. Now they're not going to fool anyone now. Zach Collaros, that's my biggest question mark. The quarterback position is going to be my biggest question mark because it was for most of the season for them last year. Sorry about that. I'm just going to make sure I unplug that. That's the biggest question I have. Can Collaros stay healthy for the whole year? And it's not, sometimes it was, the last few years wasn't his fault. That was more so he got cheap shotted, but they don't have a CFL experienced backup behind him. I thought that was a position they should have tried to solidify, because with Collaros, you just don't know. And maybe they're going to figure out a way to insulate him with the run game a little bit more, so he's not standing back in the pocket as much. And maybe that's the direction they go. But that's going to be the biggest question mark for me with Winnipeg.
For me, that is the biggest question mark on the roster.
Yes.
The biggest question mark on Winnipeg is the offensive game plan. All our police moved to Montreal. He brought with him Matt Nichols, a quarterback that he did very well in Winnipeg, that he had some success with. And that takes away the depth that they had, with Strebler, Nichols, and of course their starting quarterback, Collaros. They had real depth at quarterback. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Now the question is, does the new offensive coordinator in Winnipeg have his eye on a player, or does the head coach have his eye on a player that they may bring in? It's quite possible. David, all the teams are taking a different approach. The Toronto Argonauts are acting as if they want to win the Grey Cup this year. Damn the Torpedoes, and the Torpedoes being COVID-19. Damn the Torpedoes, we're going after it. Other teams like Winnipeg, we're assuming they're doing it because they feel comfortable where they are, right, with what they've got. And they're protecting what they had so they can move forward with what they had, because they have a winning combination in their mind. But they do need to replace the offensive plan that LaPolice was known to be. I don't know whether it was the TSN guys because he was on TSN. He was, everybody, when you listen to the game, everybody talked about how great he was as an offensive coordinator. He should be a head coach, all this kind of stuff, right? Now he is a head coach and he's not in Winnipeg. Does Winnipeg find an offensive coordinator? Are you satisfied with their new offensive coordinator?
Buck Pierce has a relationship with Winnipeg. For the last, he's spent the last few years with that. I don't know if is he gonna put a different stamp on that offense, or is he gonna try to carry over the offense that was already there? That's a good question. That, because I know a lot of teams were looking at Buck Pierce as a potential coaching candidate. I don't know whether that was offensive coordinator, or I doubt that was a head coach. He didn't really have the experience. I think because he was there, he was, a big part of that coaching staff, and they felt like, retaining him was very important. Buck Pierce could have gone with LaPolice to Ottawa, but he chose to stay in Winnipeg. And I guess, my guess is that job is a lot more enticing than the Ottawa job. He knows what he has in Winnipeg. That's probably the easiest thing for Buck Pierce. He's been in those meetings. He knows what he has on the roster. He doesn't have to start from scratch. But now it's all the pressure's on him.
David, that goes to the continuity thing that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They want to maintain the way things are going. And Buck Pierce got a lot of credit for their offense, even though, let's face it, that police cast a very long shadow, right? But
Mhm.
Buck has been with the team. He retired as the Winnipeg Blue Bomber. He is a Winnipeg Blue Bomber. So, if there's anybody that deserves a chance, I'll start there. He deserves a chance. He's been with the team. They know what he's like in the quarterback room because he's been there.
Yes.
They know, what he understands about the game. They know how his relationship is with his quarterbacks. They understand that. And even though they only had 1 year with Collaros, that's plenty of time for them to figure out the relationship. And I think it's important between the quarterback and the offensive coordinator. We just talked about Edmonton getting somebody to show up because Moss is there. So don't discount the familiarity that he has. That is a key component. I agree with you 100% on that regard.
And really for Winnipeg, losing La Police, in a way, they didn't have to go out and bring in another guy, which is a complication because of the coaching cap. You've already got a guy who now is adding to his duties. I worry about that sometimes. Offensive coordinators don't necessarily like to do that and be the quarterback's coach because they like to work just with the quarterbacks. If they want a guy that works just with the quarterbacks, but I guess Buck Pierce feels that he can do both. That can work. I mean, we've seen it work before. I know the Argos I think it was 2019. They brought in a quarterbacks coach halfway through the season. They had to let go another coach in order to make it work. Like, teams have to kind of manage that. Winnipeg, again, probably the best situated team to do it. They just, to add the role for Buck Pierce, he must have been comfortable enough to say, I can do both. And, he's not doing everything. They have a pass game analyst. They have a receivers coach. They have a running backs coach. So he can just focus on the offensive game and the quarterbacks. So hopefully the transition won't be that strict, that tough for him.
Absolutely. Again, Winnipeg's the defending champion. I think they'll be a really good team. To summarize the East and the West, it's safe to say that there could have been a lot less activity because of COVID. If I were to rate the league in general, more yes than no, people are acting. Management teams across the league are acting, for the most part, like there's going to be a season.
Yeah.
And let's talk about who's more prepared for that season. At the top of the list, not because we're here, we're in Ontario, you're in Toronto. Toronto has been the most active and has a lot of big names. And because of the big names and the talent that they've brought in, the automatic question becomes, and we've heard it on the internet, people are asking the big question, how are they under the cap? How are they under the cap, David?
This has been the biggest question, and I've seen a lot of criticism about the Argos because of it. We had the report that apparently they went over the cap a few years ago. The problem with this whole thing, we don't know what anyone is making. We don't know what I know the salary cap number is about 5.3 million. I see a lot of these moves that they've made. We have to remember that some of them are American guys that are making rookie salaries. They're not all making shiny dollar like Charleston Hughes, Cameron Judge. I don't think Eric Rogers is making what Darrell Walker was making when he came here for well over 200,000 reported. I think it was 240, if I'm not wrong. Cordero Law, he's probably not getting shortchanged, but he's not making a lot of money either. I think there is a case where maybe some guys are taking less, and I think where they're gonna trim a lot of these guys. It's not gonna be the big ticket guys that they brought in from Calgary or Saskatchewan, like those big free agents. It's gonna be some of the surplus. I look at how many running backs they have. They have so many running backs. Those are easy to cut. Receivers, those are easy to cut for the most part. They're all about having as many options as possible. They're going to trim down. Some of these guys are not going to make it. I look at the CFL veterans as the guys I would say that are safe. It's the newer guys. I think maybe we are going to start seeing some cuts.
Good point here, and I think it's very important. They don't have a Mike Riley quarterback on the team.
I was just about to say too.
Is not what their quarterbacks are making. I don't even think, obviously, not even the both of them together are making that. I don't think the backfield and the quarterbacks together are making. Am I making my point? So that extra money that BC is spending on their quarterback, if the Argos were to get a legitimate number one, because we all know that Nick Arbuckle has the makings of being a great quarterback. Antonio Pitkin, another great possibility for a great quarterback. Yeah. But they're not great now, and their contracts don't reflect them being great. I don't think they do, because, with all the negotiations as far as salary cap is concerned, and we know from the press conference that Nick Arbuckle was willing to take a pretty severe pay cut, and it wouldn't have taken much for the Argos to climb up and offer a little more than Ottawa's offering, and that amount still leaves a lot of extra. We all know that. Well, look, the Argos have some very talented players because of a $10,000 difference between what a team offered and what a player wanted. We saw that. We know that. We know that pretty much as a fact. So $10,000, that's that fits into $300,000 a few times. So that helps their salary scale, because they're not taking a big bite out of the cap with one player. It's more spread out along the team. And what you're saying, and I agree with you, you're basically saying that right now they're just bringing people in. They're trying to stay around the salary cap, and later they're just going to have to finesse it, tweak it, whatever that means. Because we don't know exactly what the players are getting, making, earning, contracted. We can only assume that if they can't make a player work, he will be jettisoned. It's just that simple. And they're going to have to pick player A or player B. He makes this much, he makes this much. He's of this value, he's of this value. Which one do we can't have both. Got to get rid of one just to work with the salary cap. So you're 100% right in that regard.
Remember,
so are looking really good, and good for them. And an ex-Argo and Hamilton Tiger Cat retired. Rico Murray has retired. He left Hamilton, came to Toronto, won a Grey Cup, went to Ottawa, almost won a Grey Cup, and then went back to Hamilton, and he's hoping to win
almost won a Grey Cup again.
Hoping to win a Grey Cup.
Almost did the 3 for 3.
Yeah, so what a great player he was. And when I met him in the when we did our post games with him or practices, interviews and stuff like that, he was a very, very straightforward guy, and he was very I can understand why he was so good. He was committed to being straight on the field and even in the locker room. And I respect him, and I really appreciated the interaction I had with him. And good for him that he won a Grey Cup. It didn't look like it was going to happen, and then it did. He's one of those players that is a big player, and you can count on him. And it's great that he won a Grey Cup, because he really did deserve it. His pedigree says Grey Cup champion. He had it, and good for him.
He let his play on the field do all the talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I liked about him. There are guys, and rightfully so, they have the right to talk and show not ego, but really let people know that they were good. But what I liked about Rico was, he backed up what he would say on the field. He wasn't one of those guys that would just talk, and then you're kind of, something would go against him, and you're like, oh, for a guy who talks a lot. But he wasn't that type of player. He was the guy that the Argos in that 2017 season, the defense was very underrated because of veterans like Rico, like Sean Lemon, oh my God, blanking, Dylan Wynn, they had so many of those veteran guys that just did what they needed to do. It was that simple. And he had his chances to win multiple Grey Cups. That, I think, and to be a big part of those Grey Cup teams, he wasn't just there. He was a big part of it. So great career for him. It's better for him to go out when he's ready to go out than for football to tell him when he's done.
Yeah, and it's got to be tough for the older veterans because get her going, get the new season going. It's for them than it is the rookies. The older body takes a little longer to tune up your body and get it up to speed than it does for younger players. So, with this delay, we both agreed, because we've discussed this before, that the temptation because of the gap in seasons comes a little higher with players, because quite frankly, they're playing the game because they love the game. And this is a generalization, and I accept any blowback from fans, you even, anyone. They have to get their life going too. It gets to the point now where they may have gotten that free education out of college. They may have their foot in their future business, their future life, and they go, well, you know what? Maybe it's time for me to dive 100% into what I want to do in my life. And it is what they're looking towards in the future, a much bigger part of their life, in as far as money making is concerned. Because the life of leaving college, being a pro, for most players, does not span 10 years. So, 10 years in your life is not the biggest thing. After that, they got 40, 50 years of working on something, building their family, building their business, whatever that is they want to do, whether it's build their talents, and as far as being able to, find their vocation and exercise and all that lovely stuff. That decision becomes much more difficult to ignore when you didn't play last year and you're not sure you're going to play this.
I bring, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was listening to the Waggle podcast, the CFL podcast, not too long ago. Farhan Lalji was on from TSN, and he said exactly this, exactly what you're saying. A lot of these players now are realizing they need to prepare for life after football. Solomon Eliminian, that was a big part of, he was so good on the field, off the field, he was doing even more. Whether it was with the CFLPA or even just for himself personally. And, if you look at the CFLPA and a lot of these players, if you listen to how they interact with each other, they're all talking with each other about, guys, you need to really start looking and thinking about what you're going to do when football's not an option for you anymore. And you got to try to get your easy, as seamless as a transition as you can make. It's not easy. It takes time when you're in a routine and you're used to a certain way of living and a certain way of, going about your life as an athlete versus an everyday person. That transition, as you said, Frank, is not easy, especially you dedicate so much of your time, so much of your life to pushing for a career in football, making, a living for your family playing football. And I appreciate the CFLPA, I think more so now than ever, making these players realize you got to look at for yourself after, look at what, and I think the part that Farhan has said that I really liked is, don't let the game of football use you. How can you use the game of football? And I think for a lot of these guys, that's the big key.
In my head, it's ringing sound in my head while you were saying that. And the ringing sound is this. You don't hear it from the players very often. But can you imagine right now, with all the situation the way it is, and as you get closer to retirement age, that sound in your head, and that sound I think they're saying in their head, they might not say out loud, is, do I really need this? Is this really where I need to be? Is this what I'm looking forward to? Is this still fun? Do I want to do this anymore? All those questions, retirement, and it's once you retire, it's hard to, you can't unretire. It's Wilder did it, but
He didn't officially do it, but he did. Technically said he did.
He said he did. Technically, he did. So There is paperwork that needs to be done, and that paperwork can't be withdrawn once it's brought into the CFLPA, once the Canadian Football League is part of their, due process, if you will. It's you don't get to go back anymore. So that decision is a big decision. So it's not one that a player makes, and if they do make it on a whim, if you will, as opposed to careful thought, it can be very painful because once you retire, you're retired. So they're going to it's painstaking making the decision to retire. I can't imagine. And on Solomon Aluminium, I like what you said about him. And he was a guy who could retire because he could stay in football. He had, not that he retired because he was going to be the CFLPA president, but it made it easier for him because he still gets to be a part of football if he really needs to, because this is what the players miss more than anything when it comes to athletes and sports. Going into that locker room, going into that dressing room, I hate to say it like this, but what the heck, the smell that uniform soaked sweat, that smell that you get in the room, it's not a fine cigar, but it has the kind of appeal a fine cigar has. They love what they do. Their memories of the game will always be fond. It's a sadness when players don't get the kind of reflection that they deserve. We've seen the odd player that retires just out of I'm so upset and angry. The Pete Rose thing, for example. Not everybody retires on great terms. Solomon Aluminium retired in the best way possible. The only thing better than what he did is to go into the coaching ranks.
That's what I was about to say. How many of these guys try so hard to stay close to the game? Usually they start off at the high school level. They coach the high school, especially in places where coaching high school is actually a big job. It's not like a volunteer thing. It's so hard, as you said, Frank, that you miss it. You miss the camaraderie of being in that locker room. That's why coaching is usually the next step for a lot of these guys. Now, the other thing too is not everyone is capable of coaching. Not everyone is meant to coach. So that's also the tough part. How do you? That's why some do broadcasting, right? Analyze the game in that regard. Some do scouting. There are many ways that players can continue to put a stamp on the game. It's not the same because when you're on the field, there's, as you said, there's something about it that just for an athlete it clicks. But there's a time and a place, when that you're done. And it's funny because a lot of athletes will say that when you're first deciding whether it is time, when you feel like it's time, that's usually when it's a good indication that you're ready to let the game go. When you kind of have that first thought in your head, some guys can fight it. Some guys are like, I'm not ready yet, but they're thinking about it. For some, it's usually that first instant, like, do I really want to do this, continue doing this, especially for football? The physical toll it takes, like, is it really worth it for me anymore? And that's I think for football it's a little bit easier than in other sports where you can kind of push yourself a little bit.
Regret, passion, of the game, and now a little bit of heart. We haven't mentioned yet about Joey Moss and with Edmonton, a loved person by the fans, players, everybody. They had this Winfred Stewart Association Joey Moss Memorial Fund. They raised almost, goodness gracious, $1 million, 991 million thousand and change they raised.
Wow.
This is a testament to why we miss the Canadian Football League, why people miss the Canadian Football League. It is the connection to the fans and to the people who aren't in center stage of the Canadian Football League and its members, each team. They're all over. All these great players and all these great stories of these CFL teams and the CFL itself showing love and affection for people they're in their group that are not in the limelight. And I just wanted to salute Edmonton and all the fans in Edmonton for raising all that money. And Joey Moss, I know you're terribly missed, but you left a legacy behind, and his legacy will continue because of this lottery that they put together, amassed $991,000.
This is where people, I think, underestimate the impact of the CFL. People say, "Oh, like, the league won't be able to survive." I says, "Well, if people keep saying the league won't survive another, keeps under the COVID circumstances, a lot of these communities are going to be missing out on a big part of things like this, being able to raise money using, how many organizations look to sports to, help with a certain cause. For Joey, his life is totally different because of sports, because of the CFL, because of hockey. I think people tend to forget that sports is not just about some owner trying to make money off of athletes or athletes trying to make money. It's about the way that it brings communities together, both at games and off the field. I think that's something that people tend to forget. This is something the CFL has been so proud of for how many years. And, I give a lot of, yeah, to echo what you said, Edmonton, what they were able to do, incredible, almost $1 million. Like that's quite an accomplishment for, someone who had a profound legacy on that city.
Yeah, and well loved, and there are, I'm trying to find the word for what was. Um, Not a mascot, obviously not a mascot, but
Ambassador.
between being a mascot and a beloved member of the organization.
He was an ambassador. That would be my word.
Yeah, you know what? Well, that's fantastic. Ambassador is, he was the ambassador between the team and the fans, and he was a perfect ambassador for that, and of course the team and his personal relationship with them. Moving on, then now we have diversity as well. Dwayne Ford is a very key component to raising diversity in the Canadian Football League. And you were mentioning about the Waggle. Donovan Bennett is the new host of the Waggle, and they did I read a nice story about Dwayne Ford and how he helped Bennett get into the business. And Donovan obviously is a black Canadian and a person of color, and he was having a little bit of a hard time getting in. Dwayne Ford put a word in, and basically was a mentor for him. The Canadian Football League has never been void of the acceptance of black Canadians, black Americans, black people in general. It's pretty, they've been pretty diverse. They've talked the game really well. I don't know how to judge exactly. All I can do, and because I want to say this, I don't want to speak for black folks. I don't want to talk to them. So all I can do is I can relay what I've heard them say and repeat it in the hopes that it makes sense to other people. It doesn't make sense. I just wanted to mention this because what Dwayne Ford was a good thing, helping a young man who maybe needed a leg up, if you will. And I think Donovan Bennett, showed his character and his ability to do what he does. Sportsnet relies on him. He did the end of year recap, so it's not like he's just sitting there and he's taken this opportunity and he's satisfied with being there.
No.
They and he have worked really hard to give him an opportunity to show how valuable he is to Sportsnet. So it isn't just about giving someone of color an opportunity. It's about when a person of color gets an opportunity and we get to see what they can do with that opportunity. That's all I wanted to say on that topic, please.
I mean, I mean, like Donovan and I are colleagues. He's somebody that I have a lot of respect for. I mean, that story was a great story because, it shows the struggle that a lot of these people go through, right? And as you said, Donovan is somebody that is motivated to not just being satisfied with what he's doing, like he's always looking to do more. You know, right now, this month, Sportsnet's doing a massive, I mean, more so than I've ever seen, putting a spotlight on black artists to giving them a platform that they don't necessarily get. That's something that he is very proud of and has been been a very big, had a big influence on, and he's really pushing it. And it's a lot of respect to that. And this is where I think the CFL, I mean, we know how big diversity is to them when they had the diversity of strength t-shirts. Those things that put the CFL on the map. I think more so than a lot of other things that the CFL has done. They were on CNN. They were down in the States. They were talking about it. It's something that CFL has embraced and has been proud about. And that in itself makes you think this is where the CFL is so different. This is something you should be proud about with the CFL. They embrace the diversity in the front office, the leadership, and the guys who are, seen as mentors. I mean, for me growing up, pinball, a huge influence on my life. I mean, as a white person growing up and seeing pinball, I did not care whether pinball was black or white. He was just so influential to me, right? But that's where I feel like the CFL, they give those people the voices. They give the people the platform that unfortunately, as we see in the world today, they don't get. This is what Donovan's working to do. He's trying to give these people the platform because these people have stories to share. They have things to share that a lot of people can benefit from. And the CFL is realizing, hey, we are a league that embraces like diversity, not just with blacks, but also with different people from various backgrounds. The global CFL initiative, while we have given it grief, it also speaks to the CFL being open to different ways of operating as a league. We don't just want to look at the people in the States. We don't want to just even look in our own backyard. We want to give the people out in Europe the opportunity, the people down in Mexico, the opportunity to pursue a professional football career. And I feel like, as that's maybe something we tend to overlook when it comes to the CFL global expansion and trying to be a more global. Maybe that's the mark we're missing. Maybe they're just trying to say we are a diverse league and we want to accept and welcome many different many different people that don't necessarily get the opportunity or don't have the platform. And I think this is where the CFL could, in a world where we're trying to embrace diversity, this is, I think, where the CFL should be pushing. They should be. This is their platform. They've used it the right way. I don't think anybody's ever given the CFL grief about the way that they've gone about this, and I think that this is something that CFL fans should be very proud of. I understand there's also people who think the CFL could do more, and we can always do more, but they have put themselves in a really good position, and something that everyone should be proud about.
What I will say is this: the definition of wokeness, genuine wokeness, sincere wokeness, is when you realize, and I'll give pinball as an example. I didn't realize he was black until people pointed out there weren't enough. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's the honest wokeness. That when you realize something that you don't have to feel that way. You don't have to have a bigoted side. You don't. You all of a sudden realize, wow, I just didn't realize that. And also want people to realize or remember this. This is everything David just spoke about. Everything I've spoken about as far as the CFL and its inclusionary behavior. It came before COVID. It came before all those tragedies that happened in the United States. Let's put it into context. This is stuff that was going on long before any of those issues became so red hot in the United States over this past summer. Okay, I'm going to give you a chance with a couple of minutes left. A topic that you'd like to talk about. What's rolling around in that big brain of yours right now?
Randy Ambrosi had a press conference last week where he didn't guarantee that a season was going to happen, but he says they're going to do everything they can and they're working towards a plan. And people are like, oh, well, how do you guys not have a plan yet? And I got into I replied to Danny Austin, who's a very prominent, big CFL guy out in Calgary, covers the league very well. And we agreed that, don't write off the CFL right now, because what the situation we are in now is not going to be the same situation we're going to be in the summertime. He's taking the right approach and saying, let's wait and see what the situation in our country is going to be like, because they can put time and money towards one potential plan and the plan changes altogether. I think, go ahead.
I disagree, man.
You disagree?
Here's the problem I've diagnosed once more very quickly, and I'm sorry to
Go ahead.
But if you don't plan for it to happen, how do you know you have a plan when it happens?
Well, I think what people are thinking is that they don't have a plan. They do have a plan. They're just not ready to say that this is exactly going to be our plan. Like, they're not going to be like, here's our plan for the season now. They're a plan.
I think they should, David. I think they should come up with a plan and say, this is what we're going to do. And then offer that plan as, okay, everybody, what do you see in this? And have everybody have a discussion. If they don't say it publicly, then they're creating a plan in a vacuum. And no plans made in a vacuum work. We've watched it in society. There should be a little more bravery. It's almost cowardly that the CFL isn't grabbing the bull by the horns and saying, you know what, we're going to have a season. Tell me we're not going to have a season. I want a little more of that, because all the Canadian Football League is knuckling under to COVID-19. All we've seen from the Canadian Football League is almost this fearful approach right from the beginning. When Randy Ambrosi went to the government and said, well, maybe we'd like to have some money. If he really wanted to have some money, he should have had the players there with him. Again,
yes.
You don't come up with the right answer in a vacuum. No one has all the right answers. I'll quote the great Pinball Clemens. I say great because, he is great. He doesn't want to be the smartest guy in the room. I'm fearful that Randy Ambrosi might want to be the smartest guy in the room. That's what I'm afraid of. If I'm to say a negative comment, that is the negative comment I would say about this commissioner, because he doesn't open up the conversation enough for my liking. And it should be opened up. Like the fans, the coaches, the players, the sponsors, the networks, everybody should be put in a position where they got to comment publicly. Let's get it. Let's come up with a plan together. And that way you have them on your side. The government's not going to care what we have to say, what the CFL has to say on their own. They're only going to care if the umbrella or the umbrella gets bigger, under that tent, the tent of what we talk about, that we talk about that's so great about the Canadian Football League. That's the contrast here. The way they're treating coming back isn't like it doesn't include everybody. It seems just linear. That's all.
I think they're working with I hear they're working with the players now. I just think I'm not worried about them not having something on February 22nd. I want to see when, April's coming around. Then I want to see a little more. April, because the season's not starting. I don't think the season's starting in June. I think it's going to be pushed a little bit. Let's have a plan, even end of March. Let's really start to hear them push towards it. I will say, I'm not saying Ambrosi has all the time in the world to figure things out. They don't. They got to figure things out, but I don't think they need to make that public right now. I think eventually, yes, we want to start seeing something a little more concrete. It's just let's give them the time to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm more than willing to give them the time to figure it out, David. But I'd like to have some evidence that they actually are confident. Like it's just like when you go on the field, man, you got to go on the field with them. But if you're a defender, that you're going to make an interception or you're going to have a sack. You're an offensive player. You're going to make that catch. You're going to make that run. You're going to make that throw. I just feel. I guess maybe I'm getting frustrated with COVID because everything stops, and I'm tired of everything stopping. I would like to see some sort of pushback when it comes to COVID. And I understand that there can be pushback that's too much. I get it. There's the line you can cross. We've seen that again. The experience of COVID, the experience of what we've gone through. There's lessons to be learned positively and negatively. On both sides of the equation. Act, don't act. Or just twiddle your thumbs. I just don't like the Nero approach. That's the part that concerns me more than anything.
No, and I totally, I think you have the right, definitely, to express that. I think it is frustrating, but I'm willing to be a little bit patient just because we know that things change all the time with the way this pandemic is going.
Okay, David, thank you very much for being here.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
He is the kind and considerate David Morassutti. I am Candid Frank, Stanisci, the impatient one. Thank you for watching CFL Talk. Seen live Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thank you for watching. I'm Kenneth Frank. Until next time.